Now, what's your emergency?
I need the police immediately. My brother is attacking his ex-wife.
It's 1-1. It's on this side of the street. It's fuck. It's him. He came out of the house.
A sea of candlelight illuminates the darkness. Hundreds of mourners gather, their faces solemn in the flickering glow. They are here for Aisha Fraser, beloved teacher, devoted mother, cherished daughter. But this is not how her story was supposed to end. On a cold November morning in 2018, in the quiet suburb of Shaker Heights, Ohio, a horrific act of violence shattered the peace of a neighborhood. A former judge, once respected in the community, would commit an unthinkable crime against the mother of his children. What began as a routine custody exchange would end in brutal murder as two young girls lost their mother at the hands of their father. This is the story of Aisha Fraser, who was stabbed to death by her ex-husband Lance Mason, a man who had already shown his capacity for violence, a man who had been given a second chance by the system he once served. You're watching Law and Crime Stories, where we shed light on the darkest true crime stories that expose the failures of our justice system and the devastating impact of domestic violence. Before we continue with Aisha's story, I want to speak directly to you. At Law and Crime Stories, we believe that telling these stories isn't just about chronicling tragedy. It's about honoring victims, exposing systemic failures, and potentially preventing future violence. If you value true crime content that goes beyond sensationalism to examine the deeper issues at play, please consider subscribing to our channel now. Your subscription helps us continue our mission of bringing these important stories to light with the respect and depth they deserve. These aren't just cases to us, they're people whose lives mattered. By subscribing, you become part of a community that refuses to let victims be forgotten and demands better from our justice system. Now let's return to the story of Aisha Fraser, a woman whose life was cut tragically short by a system that failed to protect her. To understand the tragedy of Aisha Fraser's death, we must first know her in life. Aisha Fraser was more than just a victim. She was luminous. A sixth-grade teacher at Woodbury Middle School in the Shaker Heights School District, she was described by colleagues as the kind of educator who changed lives. She had taught there for years, touching the hearts and minds of hundreds of students who passed through her classroom. Born into a family that valued education and service, Aisha carried those values into her own life. She was known for staying late to help struggling students, for remembering birthdays, for the warm smile that greeted everyone who entered her classroom. But it was as a mother that Aisha truly shined. Her two daughters, ages 11 and 8 at the time of her death, were the center of her universe. Friends say she structured her entire life around giving them stability, safety, and love. After her divorce from Lance Mason following his first violent attack against her in 2014, Aisha worked tirelessly to provide a sense of normalcy for her daughters. She coordinated with therapists, maintained routines, and somehow found the strength to co-parent with the man who had brutalized her. What makes Aisha Fraser's story all the more heartbreaking is that she did everything right. She reported the abuse. She sought protection through the courts. She followed the custody agreement. She kept detailed records. She tried to maintain peace for her children's sake, and still, the system failed her. Lance Mason and Aisha Fraser seemed like the perfect couple on paper. He was a rising star in Ohio politics, a former state representative and state senator who was appointed to the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas in 2008. She was a dedicated teacher with a passion for helping children. They married and had two daughters, creating what appeared from the outside to be an ideal family. But behind closed doors, a different reality was taking shape. Friends would later report that Mason had shown controlling tendencies throughout their marriage. He managed the finances tightly, often questioned Aisha's whereabouts, and was known to have a temper. Yet, like many victims of domestic violence, Aisha kept these troubles private. Perhaps hoping things would improve, perhaps fearful of the consequences of speaking out against a powerful judge. The facade crumbled completely on August 2, 2014. The couple was driving home from a funeral when an argument erupted in the car. Their two daughters, then just 4 and 6 years old, were in the back seat as Lance Mason began an assault so violent it would forever change the trajectory of both their lives. While driving, he punched his wife 20 times, repeatedly slamming her head against the dashboard, armrest, and passenger window. He continued to beat her after she attempted to exit the vehicle, breaking her orbital bone and causing injuries so severe she required reconstructive surgery.
All right, calm down so you can get some help, okay?
Aisha Mason.
911, Shaker Police, emergency.
Yes, my husband just beat me and threw me out the car. He has my two daughters in the car.
Where you at?
Van Aiken Boulevard.
Yeah.
And Avalon. He just threw me out the car. Orange Saturn View 2008. I'm afraid he's going to hurt my daughters.
Is he with you now, or did he
No,
drive off?
He drove off.
Which way on Van Aiken?
He went going down towards the police station. He probably hit Chagrin.
Okay, yeah, somebody else called about that. Where are you calling? What's your phone number? Where would you call you?
They're taking me to South Point now.
Who's taking you to South Point?
Some nice people in the car stopped. I jumped in.
You in the car now?
In another person's car. Please find my kids.
Are you injured?
Yes. I need some air. Oh.
Is it yeah, 'cause we're gonna, so do you want an officer to meet you up at, South Point then?
Yes, but find my kids, Saturn View, 2008.
Do you know the plate? Do you have the plate? Do you have the plate? Do you know the plate on it?
It's, YME 479 or something like that, YME.
Car 2214-252, just be advised, I'm speaking to the victim, the wife, and she got picked up by another vehicle, and she's going to South Point. Where are you at right now?
I'm heading up Van Aiken.
She exited that orange vehicle, and she got picked up by a passerby. Hold on a second.
Do you have another phone? Could you dial 921?
That's what I think. Yeah, ma'am, what's your first name?
Aisha.
Aisha? Okay,
Yeah.
Can you tell the driver just to stop where you're at, and we're going to have the squad meet you.
Oh, okay.
An officer, okay? So where are you going to be pulling over at?
We're at this church, St. Peter's
Dominic's?
Lutheran Church. No,
What?
St. Peter's Lutheran Church. They want you to pull over and park.
So where are you at exactly?
St. Peter's Lutheran Church at Van Aiken and Ingleside. Did you find the car?
52252, the vehicle stopped at Van Aiken Ingleside. I'm going to have the squad respond there.
Did you find the
What kind of car are you in?
It's a black. What is this? They have the flashes on. It's a black. What kind of car is this? Mercedes.
A black Mercedes?
Yes. Did you find the Saturn
She's
View?
going to be in a black Mercedes with their flashes on, Van Aiken Ingleside. I'm calling the squad now.
They're here. Did you find the Saturn View?
Are you with an officer, ma'am?
Yeah, they just pulled up. Did
Okay.
you find the Saturn View?
Police searched Mason's home. They found an arsenal of weapons, including smoke grenades, semi-automatic rifles, and over 2,500 rounds of ammunition. 2 days later, Aisha Fraser filed for divorce. Lance Mason was arrested, charged, and eventually pled guilty to attempted felonious assault and domestic violence. Despite the severity of the attack, he received just a 2-year prison sentence. He would serve only 9 months. The divorce was finalized in 2015. Aisha was granted custody of their 2 daughters, with Lance Mason receiving visitation rights after his release from prison. Despite what he had done to her, Aisha facilitated these visits, believing it important for her daughters to maintain a relationship with their father. It was a decision that reflected her character, always putting her children first, but one that would ultimately place her in harm's way again. November 17, 2018. A crisp Saturday morning in Shaker Heights, Ohio. The leaves had turned to rich shades of amber and gold, and families throughout the neighborhood were preparing for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday, just days away. For Aisha Fraser, it was supposed to be a routine morning. She had plans to drop her daughters off at her sister-in-law's home, Lance Mason's sister, where the girls would spend time with their father under the supervision of family. This arrangement had been working for months, a careful balance that allowed the girls to maintain a relationship with their father while ensuring Aisha's safety. She dressed her daughters warmly against the November chill. The 11-year-old was growing more independent, picking out her own clothes while the 8-year-old still liked her mother's help with her hair. These small, precious moments of normal family life would be their last together. As they drove to the sister-in-law's home on Chagrin Boulevard, there was no indication that anything was amiss, no warning signs that this day would end in tragedy. The girls may have been chatting about school, their upcoming Thanksgiving break, or what they planned to do with their father that day. What no one knew was that Lance Mason, who had been released from prison, had his law license suspended, and had remarkably been hired by the city of Cleveland as a minority business development director, was harboring resentment and rage. For him, this would not be a normal visitation day. He had made plans of his own. Just after 9 a.m., Aisha arrived at the sister-in-law's home. She may have expected the exchange to be brief, a quick goodbye to her daughters before leaving them in the care of their aunt and father. But something was different this time. According to sources close to the investigation, Lance Mason was agitated from the moment Aisha arrived. Witnesses would later report hearing raised voices almost immediately. The exact nature of their argument remains unclear, but the tension escalated rapidly. Within minutes of Aisha's arrival, something caused Lance Mason's sister to make a frantic call to emergency services. Before help could arrive, the situation had already spiraled beyond control. The argument had moved outside the house, where neighbors would later report hearing screams. One neighbor told investigators she looked out her window after hearing the commotion. She saw them in the driveway. He was following her, and she was clearly trying to get away. The neighbor turned to call for help, and when she looked back, Aisha was on the ground. It happened so fast. By the time police were dispatched to the scene, Lance Mason had already committed the unthinkable and was attempting to flee.
911, what's your emergency?
I need the police immediately. My brother is attacking his ex-wife.
Now to a developing story tonight. A woman is dead, a police officer in the hospital, and the connection, a former Cuyahoga County judge who the investigator Tom Meyer first told you was hired back by the city of Cleveland in August of last year. Thanks so much for joining us tonight at 6 on Lena Live. Right now, former Judge Lance Mason still works for the city as the Minority Business Development Director. In 2014, he brutally beat Aisha Fraser Mason with their children in the car. Tonight, police say he stabbed her to death.
The violence that erupted that morning was swift and brutal. According to investigators, Lance Mason attacked Aisha Fraser with a knife, stabbing her multiple times. The medical examiner would later determine that these wounds were fatal. The attack happened in the driveway of the home, in full view of the neighborhood and potentially within sight or earshot of Mason's young daughters, who were inside the house. These same children who had witnessed their father's previous assault on their mother 4 years earlier were now nearby as he took her life. As police responded to the 911 call, Mason attempted to flee the scene. In his desperation to escape, he got into his SUV and accelerated down the street, but his attempt was short-lived. Just blocks from the scene of the murder, Mason crashed his vehicle head-on into a police cruiser that was responding to the emergency call. The collision injured the officer inside and caused significant damage to both vehicles. It was the final destructive act in a morning of violence that had already claimed Aisha Fraser's life. After the collision, Mason attempted to flee on foot, but was quickly apprehended by police. He was injured in the crash and taken to the hospital under police custody. When emergency responders arrived at the home, they found Aisha Fraser's body in the driveway. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead at the scene. She was 45 years old. As news of the murder spread throughout the community, shock and disbelief were quickly followed by grief and outrage. How could this happen? How could a man with a history of violent abuse against his ex-wife be free to kill her just 4 years later? Police secured the crime scene as investigators began the solemn work of documenting the evidence. The girls were immediately taken into protective custody and later placed with family members who would shield them from the media attention that would soon engulf their mother's death and their father's crime. At the hospital, doctors treated Lance Mason for injuries sustained in the crash, while police officers stood guard. The officer he had injured was also receiving treatment for his injuries. By evening, the Shaker Heights Police Department had issued a brief statement confirming that they had responded to a domestic incident where they discovered the body of Aisha Fraser, and that Lance Mason had been apprehended following a vehicle collision with a police cruiser. Word quickly reached Woodbury Middle School, where Aisha had taught for years. An emergency meeting was called among staff members to discuss how to inform students and parents about the tragedy. Grief counselors were arranged to be on hand when children returned to school after the weekend. The Shaker Heights School District released a statement expressing their devastation at the loss of a devoted mother and committed teacher who had touched the lives of so many students. As night fell on that terrible Saturday, a community was left reeling. 2 young girls were left without their mother, and a family was left to plan a funeral just days before what should have been a Thanksgiving celebration. Here on Law and Crime Stories, we don't just tell you what happened. We examine why it happened and what could have been done to prevent these tragedies. The ripple effects of violence extend far beyond the immediate victims. In the case of Aisha Fraser's murder, those ripples have forever altered the lives of her 2 young daughters, her parents, her extended family, and a community that loved her. In the days following her death, candlelight vigils were held outside Woodbury Middle School, where Aisha had taught. Hundreds gathered to mourn: students, parents, teachers, and community members who had been touched by her kindness. For Aisha's family, the grief was compounded by the knowledge that her death could have been prevented. Her parents lost their daughter to a man who had already demonstrated his capacity for violence. The most profound impact, of course, fell on Aisha's daughters. In an instant, they lost both parents, their mother to death and their father to imprisonment for her murder. They were taken in by family members who now faced the daunting task of helping them process trauma no child should ever experience. When children witness domestic violence, particularly when it involves their parents, it creates trauma that can affect every aspect of their development. When that violence results in the death of one parent at the hands of another, the psychological impacts are profound and complex. These children will need extensive support, therapy, and stable, loving care to help them navigate this tragedy. In the wake of Aisha's death, her family established a foundation in her name, dedicated to supporting children affected by domestic violence and funding educational opportunities for underprivileged youth, causes Aisha had championed throughout her life. On November 19, 2018, just 2 days after Aisha Fraser's murder, Lance Mason appeared in Shaker Heights Municipal Court via video from his hospital bed. The man who had once presided over criminal cases as a judge now found himself facing the most serious charge possible: aggravated murder. The court set no bond, remanding Mason to custody pending grand jury proceedings. The investigation continued as prosecutors built their case, gathering evidence from the crime scene, witness statements, and the history of domestic violence that preceded the murder. On December 14, 2018, a Cuyahoga County grand jury returned an indictment against Lance Mason on 6 counts: 1 count of aggravated murder, 1 count of murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, 1 count of violating a protection order, and 1 count of grand theft. The additional charge of grand theft stemmed from Mason's theft of his sister's car as he attempted to flee the scene. The protection order violation related to a court order prohibiting him from being within 500 feet of Aisha Fraser, an order he violated when he attacked her. In the months that followed, legal proceedings moved forward with pretrial hearings and motions. The city of Cleveland terminated Mason's employment immediately after his arrest, issuing a statement expressing condolences to Aisha's family. On August 20, 2019, 9 months after the murder, Lance Mason appeared in Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court and pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, felonious assault, violating a protection order, and grand theft. On September 12, 2019, Lance Mason was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. He would be 84 years old before he could be considered for release. At the sentencing hearing, members of Aisha's family addressed the court, expressing their profound grief and anger. Her mother told the court that Mason didn't just kill her daughter that day, he killed part of all who loved her, and that her children would grow up without their mother because of his actions. No sentence, she said, could ever repair what he had broken. Here on Law and Crime Stories, we don't just recount crimes, we analyze the systems that allow them to happen. The murder of Aisha Fraser represents a catastrophic failure of the systems designed to protect victims of domestic violence. The warning signs were not subtle. They were blaring sirens that went unheeded. In the United States, 1 in 4 women experiences severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. What many people don't realize is that the most dangerous time for a victim is when they attempt to leave the relationship. More than 70% of domestic violence murders happen during or after separation. Lance Mason's first violent attack on Aisha in 2014 was extreme and occurred in front of their children. Police found an arsenal of weapons in his home. These factors are known predictors of high lethality risk in domestic violence cases. Yet, despite the severity of this attack, Mason served just 9 months in prison. More troublingly, after his release, he was hired by the city of Cleveland for a position of public trust, a decision that sent a devastating message about how seriously his crime was taken. When powerful men commit acts of violence and receive lenient sentences, it reinforces the perception that some people are above the law. Mason's status as a former judge likely influenced how his case was handled, both the sentencing for his first offense and his remarkable rehabilitation in the public eye afterward. Statistically, domestic violence is one of the most underreported crimes, with only about 50% of incidents reported to police. Victims often fear they won't be believed or protected, particularly when their abuser holds a position of power or influence in the community. Aisha Fraser did everything society tells victims to do. She reported the abuse. She obtained a protection order. She proceeded with divorce. She documented everything. And still, she was murdered by her abuser. Her case illustrates the critical gaps in our approach to domestic violence. First, sentences for domestic violence often fail to reflect the severity of the crime or the danger the perpetrator poses. Second, supervision after release is frequently inadequate, with limited monitoring of offenders' compliance with court orders. Third, the coordination between criminal courts, family courts, and child protective services is often insufficient, leaving victims navigating multiple systems with contradictory demands. And finally, there remains a troubling tendency to rehabilitate the public image of abusers, particularly those with status or influence, without adequate evidence of genuine reform. In the wake of Aisha's murder, there have been calls for reform. Ohio legislators proposed Aisha's Law, which would strengthen protection for domestic violence victims by implementing risk assessment protocols, increasing penalties for strangulation, and expanding resources for victims trying to safely leave dangerous situations. While these reforms are important steps, true change requires a cultural shift in how we understand and respond to domestic violence, recognizing it not as a private family matter, but as a serious crime with lethal potential. One of the most troubling aspects of this case is how predictable it was. Experts in domestic violence have long identified specific risk factors that indicate when a situation may turn deadly: previous serious violence, access to weapons, controlling behavior, threats to kill, and attempts to leave the relationship. Aisha's situation had all these warning signs, yet the system that should have protected her failed at multiple points: when abusers receive light sentences for serious violence, when they're quickly reintegrated into positions of respect and authority, and when protection orders are treated as mere formalities rather than life-saving interventions, we send a dangerous message to both victims and perpetrators. Aisha Fraser's life cannot be defined by how it ended. Those who knew her speak of her radiant smile, her dedication to her students, her unconditional love for her daughters, and her quiet strength in the face of adversity. In the years since her death, her memory has been honored in numerous ways. The Aisha Fraser Foundation provides scholarships to students pursuing careers in education and supports children affected by domestic violence. Woodbury Middle School established an annual Kindness Day on her birthday, celebrating the quality that defined her approach to teaching and life. And perhaps most significantly, Aisha's Law was introduced in the Ohio legislature, aiming to transform how the state responds to domestic violence cases. The bill requires law enforcement to conduct lethality assessments when responding to domestic violence calls and creates a network of support for high-risk victims. Aisha's impact on her school community continues. The way she connected with students, especially those who were struggling, was remarkable. Stories like Aisha's are why we created Law and Crime Stories. Behind every headline, there are real people whose lives are forever changed. There are lessons to be learned, systems to be improved, and awareness to be raised. As we conclude Aisha's story, I want to speak directly to you, our viewer. The work of preventing domestic violence isn't just for legislators or law enforcement. It's for all of us. It means believing victims when they come forward. It means understanding that domestic violence affects people of all backgrounds, education levels, and social standings. It means recognizing the warning signs in our communities and having the courage to speak up. If we truly want to honor Aisha's memory, we must commit to creating a world where victims are protected, where abusers are held accountable, and where no one has to live in fear of someone who claims to love them. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, help is available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached at 1-800-799-SAFE, 7233. You are not alone, and there are resources to help.